attend court, and that was the purpose of bypassing municipal court and going straight to the collection agency. And I would request a dismissal on the basis of failure to join necessary party. And I think I'd be successful in that regard. I believe you could pass this ordinance without administrative fees. I believe you could pass this ordinance without the circumventing the collection agency. I think everyone's, regardless of what the issue is, whether it's a stop sign violation or any other ordinance, they have a right to be in municipal court and say their piece and let the judge do their thing. This bypasses that. Then the other thing that kind of concerns me is, everyone's after presumably safety for the community, and I can appreciate that. And I've taken some spills on some ice, and it's nasty, and I'm not getting to the age where I'm as robust as I normally was. But if it's an interest in safety, then I think it's very shallow that this council, apparently, their only concern is safety when it pertains to the sidewalks. And then once you step off the sidewalk and you're into the curb, which the city has conveniently shoved a bunch of snow in that cars have parked, and it remains ice throughout almost the whole winter. And then the crown of the streets and streets that are rutted and a lack of snow removal in that regard. It's that old saying, the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So what are we doing here? Are we assuming that only pedestrian traffic is dedicated to sidewalks and nobody ever crosses the street? But you see, the city is immune from any sort of problems associated with a natural occurring event such as snow. And I just parked my bicycle out here tonight, and I noticed the sidewalk on the corner of, what would it be, 4th and Ivinson, I don't know, 30% of the sidewalk is not shoveled. But then we all know the city's exempt. So if someone were to park their car and then step off from the car onto the sidewalk, they'd be going through snow. So I think it's fairly hypocritical that the city can mandate what the public's got to do, and then they don't adhere to it themselves. So I think that should be some issues that the council should be looking at. Then the other thing, at the last council meeting, Mr. Rawls, an attorney, had brought up several points, and I always like to give the 50% status, that let's just assume that 50% of what he said was accurate. Notice that our city attorney sat silent. Notice that our city council didn't ask our city attorney, is the instances that Mr. Rawls brought forth, is there any validity to that? Everyone just sits there and they're silent. And I think it's this silence is what gets the city and a lot of people in trouble. And these things should be hammered out before you pass an ordinance. But when you have people that should be in the position of advising the council, instead they sit there and they're silent. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to provide public testimony during the... Oh, Mr. Hale, would you mind signing the sheet?
I'll get it.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to provide public testimony during the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close that public hearing. So let's move on to announcements. City Manager, do you have any announcements?
Mayor and Council, no announcements. Thank you.
Okay. So so everybody hopefully has read the articles and knows that 2018 is a year of celebration for the city of Laramie. We'll be 150 years old, approximately right around May. So to kind of spend a brief time every council meeting looking at where we were, our city clerk has unearthed some very interesting ordinances. And so I'm going to share one of those with you, hopefully every meeting while as we go through the year. So I actually have two very brief ones to share with you tonight. The first one is called Leaving a Horse Unhitched. And it says, if any person shall leave any horse or other animal attached to any carriage, wagon, cart, sleigh, sled, or other vehicle in the street, avenue, alley, or lane within the city, without securely fastening such a horse or horses or other animals, every such person upon conviction shall be fined in a sum not less than $3, nor more than $10 for leaving your horse unhitched. And the other one that we found is called Unlawful to allow female in saloon. It shall be unlawful for any woman to frequent or loiter or be in or about any saloon or other place where spirituous, vinous, malt, fermented, or intoxicating liquors are kept for sale, or to frequent, loiter, or be in and about any room or apartment connected with such premises, where intoxicating liquors are kept for sale, or which are frequented by both sexes and are commonly called wine rooms, and any woman who shall violate the provisions of this section shall be deemed guilty of disorderly conduct, and on conviction shall be fined not to exceed $100. $100 for a saloon and $3 for a horse. All right.
Have they been rescinded, or are they still in?
I believe those have been rescinded. They are no longer on the books for anybody that was concerned.
So Miss Kitty from Gunsmoke would not be allowed.
It was not good. It was no. Can't do that.
Okay.
All right. So let's move on to disclosures by city council members. Does anybody have any disclosures this evening? I have one. I am related through marriage to somebody on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board recommendation list, so I will be recusing myself from item 8L and also announcing to the public I did not take part in those interviews. All right, let's go to number 6.
Okay.
Vice Mayor.
Let's see. I move that the following changes to the agenda be approved, and tonight we have 2 changes. On our consent agenda, we are adding an item. It's 8N, and it is titled Schedule Meeting Work Session, 6 p.m., January 9th, and it's the Endow Visit Recap. And our other change is on our regular agenda. We are adding number 11A and removing item 8I from the consent agenda. So let me restate that a little clearer. Or 11A, or let's say 8I on the consent agenda becomes 11A on the regular agenda.
Second.
Second by Councilor Shumway. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Vice Mayor.
Okay, I move that the agenda be set as changed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gabriel. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. And Vice Mayor.
Okay, I move that the consent agenda be approved and that each specific action on the consent agenda be approved as indicated.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Schuster. City Clerk, can you do roll call, please?
Gabriel,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
McKinney,
Yes.
Palikas,
Yes.
Shumway,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Stoner,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes, with the exception of item 8L, and that one I am recusing myself from.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you. That motion carries. All right, so let's go on to the regular agenda. I believe we have Councilor Gabriel.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a motion to approve Simple 5 Subdivision Final Plat. This is based on findings of fact, conclusions of law, acknowledge receipt of the financial security, and the subdivision security and improvement deferral acknowledgement form, acknowledge receipt a reimbursement to Brett Moniz for development of Pine Street, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the plat.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Schuster. Senior Planner Bloom, welcome.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, this is exactly what was stated. It's a final plat. It's a two-lot subdivision that's located north of the West Side neighborhood. It actually incorporates some of the land that is being developed as the Harney Street Viaduct. So there are two landowners involved. One is Simon Contractors. The other one is the Wyoming Highway Commission. So they have both signed the Mylar and the ownership stuff. So what's going on here is there's a preliminary plat that was approved on January 6, 2015, at the first meeting of 2015. So rightfully so, they're doing that on 2018 to get this final plat complete. As stated in the motion, there is a development deferral acknowledgement form that's been completed that essentially guarantees construction of a sidewalk along Pine Street, which is presently paved and developed on the western side of the property. That totals about $8,500. There also is a reimbursement to the developer of that road, which is Brett Moniz, who developed that in conjunction with the 2009 Railroad Street, with the 2009 Riverside Acres subdivision. A little bit of history on this site here. Initially, when they went through the preliminary plat process, there's a requirement that they either seek a variance regarding improvements to Railroad Street, which is on the eastern side of that. Per city code, they would have been required to build out Railroad Street between their property and the railroad with curb, gutter, and sidewalk. They requested a variance to allow that to remain gravel because at that time it was envisioned that that roadway would essentially disappear as being part of the viaduct, and the city didn't want to assume maintenance costs for essentially an improved street in the middle of nowhere that would be going to nowhere. So that variance was approved. So this final plat does conform to that condition. Now, even going further back in time, we can go all the way back to 2004 when the batch plant was developed. It was developed by a different party. It was Osborne, James Osborne, with Osborne Cement. They had acquired the property from the Carroll Trust, and also the neighboring landowners, the Monizes, acquired some property from the Carroll Trust. At that time, the property was not subdivided through the subdivision process, and there was an agreement that was made that said that the landowners would go through the subdivision process to reflect their ownership. The Monizes have gone through and platted all of their lands to the Riverside Acres plats. They actually had 3 different phases. You see the Antelope Meadows Storage. That's one development where they have platted. They have their little retail office and commercial building on Lion Street. Another portion they had platted, as well as the land where Laramie Fire Extinguisher Services sit. Those are all lands the Monizes had platted as part of that agreement. When Simon Contractors acquired the site back in, I believe it was 2011. Wait, 2014. Boy, time flies. They weren't aware of the agreement and have worked with staff to ensure that the last piece of this puzzle, their land, got platted in accordance with that agreement. So that's what we have here today, is the last piece of the puzzle to final plat that last piece of land that used to be owned by the Carroll Trust back in the day. The applicant is present. If you have any questions, I'm open for any questions you may have regarding the subdivision itself.
Questions for city staff. Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Honor. I made myself a cryptic note, which I don't understand anymore, but maybe you can explain it. It says to resolve an illegal subdivision, and I can't find where it is in your description, but it's there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written it. Can you explain, or have you by chance explained it already? I presume you have just now about what was missing before. So can you reiterate that? What was illegal?
Yeah, Honorable Mayor and Councilor Hanson, I tried to touch base on that just a second ago. Originally, the Carroll Trust owned the entire parcel of land. Back in 2004, they conveyed 2 portions of that land, one to the Monizes, one to Osborne. And at that time, the city entered into an agreement with the Monizes and Osborne to essentially say they were going to plat it in the future to resolve the subdivision of land outside of the platting process. So this illegal subdivision, don't want to make Simon contractors look like a criminal. Those are Mark's exact words when he read the term illegal subdivision. They were made aware of this after the fact, after purchase.
So what was illegal about it? That vision or?
Honorable Mayor and Councilor Hanson, for any land, a solid parcel of land to be conveyed to another entity within the city of Laramie, they're required to go through the preliminary plat and the final plat process.
Okay, and
So
they didn't do that.
Back in
Okay.
2004, that process did not occur.
But they can be forgiven for that.
Correct. In 2004, there was an agreement that was made that set a path to forgiveness, if you will, and this is the final action in that path for forgiveness.
Any other questions for city staff? Thank you very much. Does the applicant want to speak at all, or it's your opportunity? You don't have to, but I always give it. No?
Well,
Yeah, absolutely. Don't forget to introduce yourself for the record.
Honorable Mayor and members of council, I'm Mark Madsen, Business Development Director for Simon Contractors. I do want to commend actually the city in how we worked through this process. There was a lot of confusion, and Charles was wonderful in taking my, what? Could you help me out with that? You know, but more importantly for me, as a former planning commissioner in Cheyenne, I apologize, I don't live in Laramie. Haven't since '90. I graduated. Sorry, but the trying to get the concrete plant off the 30th to me was a disaster, because we've got loaded concrete trucks coming down the hill in front of an elementary school. Now, we've talked about this many times, and now there's a new way out. You know, the asphalt plant's still up there. The hill's knocked down because of Sirius Sky Park. But this is one concern that I've got, and you know, high-end residential encroaching on heavy industrial that's always been there. You know, the situation was not perfect, and thankfully there's no gate on that side, but we still know we've got elementary kids with bicycles crossing that roadway, and we had 40,000 pounds on a 90,000-pound total coming down the hill. And you can imagine how close we were to having a disaster. So thankfully, you know, the concrete, especially here, we've got a huge load that's rotating. That makes it even harder to make evasive action. That does not exist, and now it's in an industrial zone where it belongs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for driving over to Laramie. Visit us often. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, back to council. Any discussion or comments from council? City Clerk, roll call, please.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
McKinney,
Yes.
Palikas,
Yes.
Shumway,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Stoner,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you. That motion carries. All right, let's go on to item number 11. Councilor Schuster.
Thank you. This is our snow ordinance, which has attracted a lot more attention than I ever expected it to. I move to approve original ordinance 1977 on third and final reading, amending Title 12 of the Laramie Municipal Code 12.08.020-snow, ice, and debris. Removal from the sidewalk based on findings of facts, conclusions of law, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the ordinance.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by the Vice Mayor. All right. Manager Teeny.
Mayor and Council, this is the third reading of this ordinance. Since first reading, there's been no changes proposed, so what you see in the drafted changes is basically what was proposed during that first reading. I'm really going to be available for questions, but do want to point out, as you all have seen, Mr. Moore's letter was provided as a comment. I also received a phone call last week from a Dennis Woods, who is not supportive of the ordinance. He does not like the amount of time that's being given to clear the snow, and believes that this is not fair for someone who is disabled. So those were his main points. There was a lot more discussed, but those were his really big points that I said I would bring to you. So aside from that, I'm available for questions and comments. So,
Questions for city staff? Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Honor. I don't know whether city staff should be addressed on this or the council. We have a sheet here of...
Councilor Hanson, this is an amendment from Councilor Stoner.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have, you guys have it in writing since she's on the phone this evening. And so after we get through questions, I will...
Thank you. I just didn't want this to fall by the wayside.
No,
Thank you.
No, it won't. Any other questions? Councilor Shumway.
I have a question about the notice that's posted at the residence where there's a violation. Is there any indication on the notice of the fine, the abatement costs, and the administrative fee that would be a part of the penalty should they not remove their snow in a timely manner?
Senator Cheney.
Mayor and Council, what we will do is the notice will have the full ordinance there, which includes all of that information right there in there, except for the only piece we don't know is we don't know how much a contractor will charge for each job. And so that'll be on a per site basis, depending upon how much sidewalk has to be cleared or what needs to be taken care of.
Okay, because I think a lot of people think if you ask the neighborhood boy to come and clean it, they'll do it for $10. A contractor won't; they'll do it for $100. And so they need to know that it's going to be very expensive if they don't clear their sidewalks after the notices and after all of this, because I think a lot of times people think, well, maybe they won't come back. Maybe they won't give me the fines, the fees, the costs. And to me, this is going to be very expensive, and so I just don't want to have everyone come out with the pitchforks after the fact. They should know that this is something that we're serious about.
Any other questions for city staff? Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Honor. It strikes me that, of course, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. And what I would have liked to have seen at least included in this ordinance for the public to be aware of is the possibility that there are contractors in town that you could contract with to have your sidewalk cleared. Because some people, and I've mentioned that before, are simply not capable because of age, sickness, etc., disability, to do it. They still own a house. And this is becoming a major issue for them. At least in some fashion to include, and I don't know whether that's even fair or whether that's possible, to include in the ordinance a statement, if you're not able to do this or unwilling or unable to do the clearing of the sidewalk, there is a possibility to contract with people, and the city will give you the information whom to contract with to get your sidewalk cleared. I think it would only be fair. I live in a street with several older folks, and I've done it on occasion. I've gone over and with my little machine and done it for them, but they can't do it. It's not possible. And I think this is an onus which should be addressed in some fashion. I don't know how to include it.
Senator Cheney, would you touch on where the contractors are listed?
Mayor and Council, the City of Laramie actually on our code enforcement page has a list of all the contractors within the City of Laramie that we know of that do any type of snow removal. So anyone who feels like they can't do it can contact any one of those listed there and find out what their rates are, find out when they can come and do it, and just determine on their own what would work best for them. Probably wouldn't be appropriate to put into an ordinance, but if we give that readily available, make it readily available on our website. Also, if someone contacts Brian Forrester, he can give them that list as well, whether we mail one to them or get it to them some other way if they don't use the internet, for instance. Secondly, on our typical notices, we list contractors on there so that people will take that initiative to make that phone call and actually do it themselves, because ultimately that's not what we want to be in the business of. So
Give
then,
follow-up.
just to follow up, I think then it would be very nice if Mr. Forster put a note on somebody's house to have that included in it. If you need your snow removed, please contact me. I'll put you in contact with people who can do it. Something of that nature. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, currently it's just a draft, but that's what's on here right here. We have the list of those people that do that so that they can make that contact when the notice gets posted on their property. So,
Okay. Vice Mayor?
So just to clarify, the ordinance reads right here, okay. So, following any accumulation of snow, such persons shall cause the snow or ice to be removed from sidewalks by 9 a.m. the following day. So, if the snow stops at 4 a.m. this morning, okay? Tomorrow morning, 4 a.m., it stops. Tomorrow morning. And today's Tuesday. I don't have to have my sidewalk cleaned until Thursday at 9 a.m. Is that correct?
Mayor, Council, correct.
Thank you. So in the case of some of our comments from the public, they would have literally, if the snow stops at 4 a.m., they have that whole day plus until 9 a.m. the next day.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for city staff? Okay. Thank you. So I know we have an amendment from Councilor Stoner, but before we do that, I want to go do public comment, make sure there's nobody else that wants to speak again. So I'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody else that would like to speak regarding the snow removal ordinance? Please come forward.
It's my understanding this ordinance addresses, for example, the corner lot, and it states something to the effect that the sidewalk must be cleared to the center line of the alley. Some sort of concern about the alley. And I really question the alley, of course, could be adjacent to one's property, but the alley is not the property owner's property, so to speak. And so you really wonder if the alley is, the sidewalk that is adjacent to the alley is part of the property owner's responsibility. Then the other thing that strikes me odd is the sidewalks are considered public property, but yet the property owner is responsible for public property. That seems to be somewhat of a contradiction, but I doubt if that'll get handled here tonight. But it just really seems pretty strange. The other thing is, I don't think you have any idea of how costly this could conceivably be for someone that is in violation. Now, let's just say over Christmas break, a good portion of the community leaves to go to Arizona or wherever they decide they would like to go. Nobody can anticipate how many times it's going to snow or when it'll snow. And what you've done is you've created, so let's say it snowed half a dozen times and during the course of the property owner's absence. This could be very, very costly. The property owner could come back and discover that they owe a lot of money. Now, what may seem like it's not that expensive to just call the contractor and get on some sort of list, that's one issue. But when a contractor has a number of clients and he's got a time schedule and what's most efficient to send his crew around town, and then 8 o'clock in the morning they've got everything pretty much done and put away. Equipment is no longer mobilized. 9 o'clock comes along. The city's discovered that there's been some noncompliance. The contractor's notified. Now he's got to find somebody that's free. These people get up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. He's got to find somebody midday that maybe is not taking classes or can get out of classes or whatever the situation may be. Mobilize equipment for a one-time deal. The snow has been packed down because of noncompliance. It's difficult to remove. It may require chipping. It's not just something you can run a snow shovel over. Meanwhile, the clock is running, and you may very well have some very irate people. And if this were to happen 6 times to the same person, added into the administrative fees, I think you're going to have some very angry people that are going to wonder if the council was asleep at the switch when they got this ordinance through. So I think there should be some limits, and clearly I think an administrative fee is nothing more than a very punitive action when the city staff is getting paid anyway.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to offer public comment? Please come forward.
I support this ordinance 100%. I'm Judy Snoke, and I think that it is very important, and I really love the idea of having a list, and I hope it gets published in the newspaper as well as online of different people that you can contact. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we were gone during quote-unquote Christmas week, and we're fortunate that it didn't snow. But we have very kind neighbors who look after each other. We just do. And if somebody had needed something, their phone calls could be made so that we could follow up. But it would surely be nice that I know it snowed and I'm a regular weather checker, then I could have a list of somebody that I know of several organizations in town who do remove snow, and I would not hesitate to have them come and take care of what needed to be taken care of. And regarding the alley is concerned, if you're walking between blocks, sidewalk, break with the alley and sidewalk, it's only sensible to just scrape that little bit. It isn't going to be the end of the world. I'm not talking about cleaning the whole confounded alley. I'm talking about what would be what I consider a straight path in a sidewalk. So I completely support it, and I do urge that the city does publish the list so that those of us who are there will have it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to offer public comment on this evening? Okay, seeing none. We'll go back to council, and if council's okay, I'm going to let Councilor Stoner put this on the floor. Oh, do you have a comment first, please?
Sure.
Councilor Gabriel?
I just wanted to follow up on Derek's comment about Mr. Woods and the difficulty that some people possibly could have by 9 o'clock. And so I'm looking forward to Councilor Stoner's changes, moving this to noon. Also, I was a little concerned about the emergency procedure, emergency abatement procedure, which I think is going to be addressed here as well. And that is talking about receiving 2 separate notices, because I think for contractors to go out after one notice and automatically remove snow and then bill the property owner, I think is a little excessive. So anyway, I think there are some concerns from the people I've talked to. I think I've received 5 or 6 emails and or calls about this, all concerning the time frame of 9 o'clock. But in Councilor Pierce's question, I think that was clarified that we have maybe a little bit more time than we think. So anyway, I'll see how this comes out with Councilor Stoner.
Okay. Councilor Stoner,
Yes.
would you like to go ahead and put your amendment on the floor?
Sure. I move to make the following changes. 1, time of removal will be noon. 2, emergency abatement procedures apply only after a property has received 2 separate notices. 3, property owner will be contacted by physical posted notice, telephone, and electronic communications. And 4, administrative fee for all violations will be $75 plus contractor charge.
Do we have a second for that amendment?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gabriel. So because Councilor Stoner is on the phone, I told her I would try to explain this if there's any questions about it. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Does anybody have any questions on the amendment? Vice Mayor?
So, from my perspective, I am supportive of some of this, but not all of this. So, may I make a suggestion that we do one item as a time, or so we...
I agree.
Councilor Stoner?
I'm happy to do that. I'm happy
Okay.
to amend my amendment.
Okay.
You have to read it.
So why don't we, second, do you agree to withdraw that amendment?
I do.
Councilor Stoner, if you'll withdraw that amendment and then make a new one to put number 1 on the floor. We'll just take them one at a time.
I realize it's more time consuming.
That's okay.
So I'll withdraw the motion, and then I move to change the time of removal to noon.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Second by Councilor Gabriel. All right. So the amendment on the floor right now is moving the time of removal to noon instead of 9 a.m. Questions? Councilor Palikas.
Not a question.
Oh,
Comment.
comments. I think we can do it all together.
Okay.
On these.
A couple of things. First of all, I'm okay with the noon if the snow were to quit sometime between midnight and in the morning. I'm not okay with pushing it back. The main reason this has come forward before council is because we've allowed too long for snow to remain on sidewalks. And what I'm talking about is not just the timeline we have here, but the reality of by the time you give a notice and then another 24 hours and so forth and so on, the reality is the snow is so packed down and so forth that it just doesn't get done. Okay, I'm comfortable with noontime if the snow quits late in the evening, after midnight and before 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm not uncomfortable if it quits the day before, and all you're doing is extending the time, and you're defeating the reason why we're trying to do this, and that's get a reasonable timeline. I think what we're losing sight on in this whole thing is at 9 o'clock in the morning, you're not getting a notice that you're going to get fined or someone's going to come shovel your sidewalk. Frankly, you're not going to get a notice because it doesn't make sense to run around town at 9 o'clock in the morning and try to tag everybody. It's worthless. What we're trying to do is get sidewalks cleared before they get trampled on and before it becomes worthless to do it, if you will. Okay? So you don't have 9 o'clock. You have 9 o'clock plus another 24 hours. It's that simple. Now, there are people out there that thumb their nose at it, and there are people out there that never clean their sidewalks, and they may get a notice at 9 o'clock in the morning, probably because they've been constant delinquent. But the other part to it is there's a lot of reasons why things don't get done, but the bottom line is if you get up early in the morning and get your sidewalk shoveled and then you move on to your job, or if the timing is not right, you do it when you get home at noontime or whatever, it's going to work, and it's going to work for the majority of people in our community. It's not going to work for the people that don't want to shovel their sidewalks. And whatever you do is not going to work for them. So I'm in favor if we were to adjust the timelines in other places, but just to have this as a straight, it doesn't make sense to me, and I would not be supporting it.
Councilor Schuster.
I'm going to agree with Dave a lot. If we approved everything that's on there, this is our old ordinance. We haven't done a thing. We went through all these readings, and we won't have done a thing. So I'm sorry I'm not going to support this, because if we do everything that's on that list, we've just went back to our old ordinance. We brought this up to change it, to try to improve it, to try to tweak it. And if we approve everything that's on that list, we haven't done a thing.
Councilor Shumway.
Item number 1. The time that most of the people are going to be removing snow is in the morning. A lot of people will get up in the dark and then try to get it finished before they have to go to work, just as the sun's coming up. Then some will come home at lunch, and other people do it after work. If we do it noon, their lunch hour usually is from noon to 1, so it'd make more sense to say 1 o'clock than it would noon. So they have 3 chances to do it each day, and frankly, the ones that really want to make it easier are the ones that are going to get up early and do it before they gets trampled on. So that you get up in the dark and do it in the dark. Hopefully, there's good street lights to do it. I would prefer to change the time to 1 o'clock so they have 3 or 4 chances, probably 4 or 5 chances to remove the snow before they're in violation.
Other comments on this? Councilor Shumway, your change would require an amendment to the amendment.
I know. Well, I'm going to vote against it unless it's changed to 1, so.
Vice Mayor.
So I am not going to support this for a whole lot of less reasons than Councilor Palikas said. But it's you basically, you've got 24 hours roughly to get rid of the snow on your sidewalk, and I think that's ample time.
So I'll make one quick comment. I got several phone calls, I think we all did, and emails about this, and the time was probably one of the biggest concerns that I heard. Although if the snow stops snowing at 4 a.m., you have a day and a half. If the snow stops at 11:45 p.m., it better be gone by 9 a.m. the next day. So that's 8 or 9 hours. And that's the concern I have as somebody who has already a crazy busy morning schedule, trying to fit tons of shoveling. I'm the lunch shoveler. I always go home at lunch and try to do that if that's what I'm doing. So, and the gentleman that called me was very concerned about somebody with a disability. I won't identify him by name, but he said, he doesn't, because of his medical condition, mornings are absolutely no-go. He really just doesn't even function until noon. I have a hard time passing an ordinance where people are going to be out of compliance. And I watched my neighborhood over Christmas break. I bet it took my neighborhood 4 days to clear the snow. And I understand that's what we're going, we're trying to clean up. But I don't see this working, and I think we're putting most of the city in it automatically out of compliance at 9 a.m. So I'm okay with extending the time to at least get the lunch shovelers, and I have no preference if it's noon to 1. I'll take an early lunch if I need to. Councilor Hanson.
And I would be for extending the time very simply from a personal experience. I used to shovel snow very early in the morning to get it cleared. Was the result that they took me over to Cheyenne because they thought I had a heart attack because it was so cold in the morning. And our kindly ambulance folks, the fire department, had to drive me all the way to Cheyenne. So there is that factor that it is very cold in the morning. And when you're a little older, maybe it's good. My wife doesn't let me shovel early anymore because she doesn't want me to go over to Cheyenne again. So I think there's some reason to extend that, and not exhort people to get out in the dark. Mr. Shumway, of course, is young enough to can do that still. Thank you.
Any other council comments before I go out to the public for this? Okay. Is there any public comment on changing the time? Okay. Seeing none. Any other comments by the council on this amendment? City Clerk, roll call on the amendment for the time change to noon.
Stoner.
Aye, yes.
Schuster.
No.
Shumway.
No.
Polikis.
No.
McKinney.
No.
Hanson.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Pierce.
No.
Somerville.
Yes.
That is 4 yeses and 5 noes, Your Honor.
That motion fails. Councilor Stoner, would you like to put your second one on the floor?
Yes, I was wondering if Councilor Shumway was going to bring, while we're still on the topic of time of day, I didn't know if he wanted to do that now.
I don't intend to change the time.
Councilor Stoner, did you hear that? Councilor,
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Okay, great. I move that the emergency abatement procedure apply only after a property has received 2 separate notices within a 60-day period.
We have a second for that.
I will second that.
Okay. Second by Councilor Gabriel. Any questions on that?
Last part of that was within a what period?
60-day period.
Okay.
Is it 60 days?
Within 60 days. So if they receive 2 separate violations within 60 days, then they would be 2 24-hour tags, then they would be eligible for abatement procedures. That would be a change from now they would be immediately eligible for abatement procedures.
So 2 notices.
Any, Councilor Polikis.
So to clarify this, you're going to put a notice on someone's door that their sidewalk has not been shoveled, and then you're not going to follow up on it for 60 days?
Within 60 days.
No, Councilor Polikis, that's not correct. So it is, basically it's kind of like a 2 strikes and you're out policy. So it makes the average person that's gone on vacation for whatever, they get a 24-hour tag. They get that one freebie before the city sends a contractor out there to scoop the snow off their sidewalks and send them a bill. So you have to have 2 separate 24-hour tags on 2 separate
Snow events.
So within 60 days to be eligible for abatement procedures.
So in essence, everybody in the community gets a pass, if I'm
Gets
just
one,
summarizing it.
basically. Yeah.
Once throughout the snow year.
Pretty much.
And then the second time, the second snow event, if the sidewalks are not cleared,
After their 24-hour tag, then
even if it's snow left over from the first time, they would be followed up on.
yep, they would be eligible for abatement procedures.
Thank you for letting me verbalize that.
Perfect. City Manager, did you have a question?
Mayor and Council, yeah, just a clarification, I think in line of what you are discussing. I'm unclear if the amendment would apply to 2 notices on 2 separate snow events within the 60 days or to 2 notices on a single snow event. Does that make sense?
Right.
Could you just clarify for me?
My understanding is it's 2 separate, but let me ask Councilor Stoner. Councilor Stoner, is it your
Yeah, that was my understanding as well, or my intention rather.
was to have 2 separate notices on 2 separate events? Okay.
Correct.
Councilor Shumway.
Well, I'm opposed to this for obvious reasons. If you park your car illegally and you get a ticket for, let's say, illegal parking, and the officer comes by the next day, you're still illegally parked with the ticket still in the window, they'll write you another ticket and put it in there. I don't think we have to wait for another snow event. I think we need to, what we're looking for is safety, and if they're not clearing the sidewalk and they're ignoring the notices, then we need to move on this to get the abatement, to get the sidewalks cleared so it's safe. So I'm not going to support this as 2 separate snow events within 60 days. I think we need to make sure that I'm not opposed to the 2 notices. It's just like playing soccer. The first time you get a yellow card, the second time you get a red card, and if you're not complying with the rules, then you need to pay the penalty that will encourage people to do the right thing.
Other comments from council? City Attorney.
I have a question, Your Honor, because we, at least I don't advise, if this passes, amending this on the fly. So, I mean, I would like a chance, and I'm sure planning would like a chance to try to work over language to get that language in front of you. Therefore, I need to, and planning needs to be clear on what this means. This debate about, is it,
2 events, 1 event.
you know, a foot of snow falls, eventually they get their notice, 24 hours, nothing happens, there's still a foot of snow. Do they get a second notice on the same snowfall, or do we have to wait for that to melt and then another snowfall? It's those kind of issues that I think myself and planning would need to know precisely what this amendment, and whatever it is fine. I just need to know.
Okay. Councilor Plikus.
I have another clarification. You're going to give a notice, and the notice, I think, is going to say your sidewalk has not been cleared.
You have 24 hours.
The next time you will be you will see action. In other words, it's okay for you not to clear the sidewalk this time because you're going to get a second. What's the notice going to say? Thank you. I mean, what can it say? Your sidewalk's not cleared. This is your warning. Next time, next snow event, we're coming after you. I think if I'm in some ways I can understand what's trying to happen with this amendment, but I think if I'm going to support it, I have to kind of figure out how this is going to work. Everybody gets a free snow removal, like a get out of jail card once a year.
Every 60 days.
Every 60 days. I'm sorry, twice a year.
Could be, depending on the snowfall.
Councilor Schuster.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the city attorney, if some of these amendments pass, would you then like us to delay third reading until you could get all the ands and buts and periods in place?
Mayor and Councilor, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll see how these go, and then we'll make a decision on that.
City Attorney, let me ask you another question. If we pass something like this that's stated this way, is there an alternative way you'd like us to do this so that we don't fumble something unnecessarily? Or do we just need to pass this amendment, see if this amendment passes, and then go from there?
I can't stress enough, Mayor, I don't, whatever the policy decision is, it is the policy decision. That's fine with me. I need more guidance.
Okay.
All
right. Well, let's see if this gains any traction, and I guess we'll go from there.
You're supposed to give guidance.
Mayor and Council, I'm going to agree with what the city attorney has to say. Is if you have some direction that you want to provide us, you can always postpone this item and provide us direction in your postponement based upon discussion that you have to bring alternative proposals forward to you at another reading so that we have something actually drafted that will work, not try to come up with something on the fly. I highly advise you not to do that.
Okay. That seems fair enough. Well, what would council like to do? We can vote this amendment up or down, but I'm not sure that's exactly what we should do if staff is going to come back with a change from the wording.
Mayor, I think there's two options. One is the amendment get withdrawn, or the other option is to vote on it. There's an amendment on the floor.
There is. Vice Mayor.
So back to the amendment. I will not support this amendment.
Okay. Other councilors' feelings on this amendment? So I guess I will add that I want to support something along these lines. I have a serious issue with, the person that's sick, that can't get out of bed, or the person that goes on vacation and ends up with a 24-hour tag and then gets a bill because a contractor showed up 24 hours later, and that becomes the enforcement mechanism of the city. I think that's overly heavy-handed. I'm really afraid that is going to be, that's a problem. For all of our other abatement and nuisance procedures, let's just take junk cars. That's a weeks-long, if not months-long process where the owner has been given a chance and talked to and tried to work with before we go into that. It's not a 24-hour thing. Oh, gosh, you weren't home. It snowed in May on a freak snowstorm, and here we come to remove your snow. And it's not that I think that that's overly common or could potentially happen. I hope it wouldn't happen all the time. But if we legislate it and we make it legal, then it's legal. And that becomes a legal enforcement of the city. I know as a homeowner, if I was sick like I was over Christmas break for 2 days, I will admit to everybody, it took me two and a half days to get my sidewalks cleaned up because we were all absolutely just sick. I mean, it just wasn't going to happen. So we would have been eligible for this. And I don't know as a homeowner or as a resident, I really want to get a $100 contractor bill plus a whatever administrative fee on top of it because I happen to be sick once, when 99% of the rest of the time my snow is cleared on time. I don't think we should be legislating this heavy of a hand. I think we have to assume anything we legislate is what's going to happen, and we need to be careful about that. So as to whether it's 2 separate notices in 60 days or 2 separate events, I don't have a preference on that, but I don't think that our first, that we should have something in the books that says 24 hours after the city can do this. So I will support this or some form of this. Any other comments, Councilor Gabriel?
Mayor, this is Phoebe.
Yep.
I guess I'm just wondering, I basically agree with all of the assessments that you just said, and that was kind of the intention of these amendments, and I'm wondering if it would be easier to withdraw and have something more polished come before council next meeting, or if we should vote on it tonight. I'm just trying to get a gauge for how other folks are feeling or the interest.
Council members have any other thoughts on postponing this and bringing back some more polished amendments? Planner Keeney, did you have a thought? City Manager.
Mayor and Councilmember Stoner, I would suggest, and this is my preference, I was just discussing this with Derek, what you're really putting forward is not verbatim amendments where language in particular is going to be changed in the ordinance. We've all agreed that it makes more sense to let the attorney do that, working with staff. But I would like to see you vote on any amendments you bring forward tonight that are like this, that are policy in nature, but not actually rewriting the ordinance. And the reason I'd like you to do that is then we know that there is a majority will for that change in policy. So when the attorney goes back working with staff, draft those changes and bring it to you on third reading. We've done so under a majority's direction. When you give us just general direction, we don't always know if there's a majority will there. And so we may go back, spend the time drafting, then come forward and find out, oops, only 4 of you supported it, not the 5th that was necessary. So I think that's helpful as far as saving time for us. So we're absolutely fine with you voting on these amendments that are kind of generic in policy in terms of navigating through that policy conversation.
City Attorney.
And to add to what the city manager just said, Mayor, if we got direction like this, I can imagine there might be 2 or 3 versions that we could put in front of you, but at least we know your policy direction.
Okay. Councilor Palikas.
Mayor, what you said, and also what Councilor Stoner has said, makes a lot of sense from the perspective of if we're in a situation where we're writing ordinances that are penalizing people that do the right thing 90% of the time and make a mistake or that's not what this should be about. But the problem is, the same token is there's so many absentee landlords, irresponsible landlords, people that just snub their nose at things. And how do you get those people to come around and be part of the community without penalizing the people that really care about the community and just happen to forget or happen to be sick or something like you're suggesting? And I would agree that what we have in front of us, if it is administered but by what it says, it's not going to work. It just won't. If it's administered in a reasonable way, okay, and it goes after the the people that are continually not doing things correctly, it would work. But you're right. It's a human being out there, and Mr. Forrester might be a great person, and he might figure it out, and then the next person that comes around. And I've seen this. I've seen this in building inspectors. I've seen it with ticket people that are. We've all heard about it. So I'm willing to bend over and try to figure out a way so that people don't get penalized that are doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing. But if we're going to make it so many holes in it that we don't cover the people that are not doing the right thing and basically sit there and say, I don't really care about my sidewalk. It's just cost me money to do it, and why should I do that? When he over here is not. We might as well just go back to the old ordinance and stick with what we got, because we're not accomplishing anything at all whatsoever. And I'll say something else. You know, as far as if you own a house, you have, whether it be you have responsibilities, and I don't care how old you are. I don't care. I mean, we as a community need to be sensitive to this type of thing and so forth. But by God, I don't think people have to have a responsibility to do the right thing as much as they possibly can. Whether that be clean their sidewalks off at midnight or 8 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night or noontime or anything else. That's not the point. The point is that if we as a community want our sidewalks clean, everybody's got to cooperate and do it. And the ones that don't cooperate and do it, we need to motivate them in some way to do it. We won't get them all, but we can get more of them than what we're getting right now. So, and one other thing, 40% of our housing is rental units. We have a bigger problem here than other places just because we have an awful lot of landlords that look at their property as an investment like a stock market and really don't want to spend any time, money, or anything else on it. All they want to do is collect the check at the end of the month. And we need to address those people. Thank you.
Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Your Honor. To this Second Amendment that we're on right now, it strikes me, reading Mr. Moore's letter and digesting it, he mentioned, I think, 4, 5, 6 properties, and as far as I remember, he wasn't sure about one of them, but the other ones were all rental units. We are basically dealing with, from what I can tell, rental units that are the problem. And for rental units, of course, we have the problem that the owner of the property lives in Timbuktu, for all we can care, for all we know. And so I think the idea of lengthening the period a little bit to notify these people, it'll take some time to notify these folks about their property. So I think that otherwise rewrite it to tag the notice on the house and say, hey, renter, that's what you have to do as far as renting this property is concerned. Because, I mean, if the problem seems to be, from what I read in Mr. Moore's letter, mainly rental properties. The most homeowners, I think, are clearing their sidewalks. So we're writing an ordinance here for people who are doing their job. And the other ones are not being addressed, or they're being addressed too late because we're shortening this time period, or we have the short time period. They don't even know about it. Maybe we should really rethink this thing and put the note on the door where the sidewalk isn't being done. I don't see any solution to this problem, From what I hear, most property owners who live in their property clear their sidewalks. Maybe there are some slough-offs, but most of them, and we're trying to write an ordinance against those people. I'm totally confused.
Well, before I go to anybody else, we're certainly getting down in the weeds here, and we've got a list of things to do here. So we also have another item after this that I want to make sure we get to, although I hope it's quick. So I'm going to try to pull us up out of the weeds and see if we can move this along. So with that, City Manager.
Mayor, Councilmember Hanson, to your point, this ordinance revision would hold the owner of a property responsible, whether he lives in the property or is simply the owner renting the property, he or
I
she.
agree,
Okay.
yeah.
So that is an important change in this ordinance from our previous ordinance, where the person occupying the property could be involved or not, the owner could be involved or not. With respect to the amendment, Mayor, I just wanted to point out for council that there is no requirement in the drafted ordinance that a contractor be hired to remove snow on first offense or any offense for that matter. It does read that the staff may hire a contractor to remove the obstruction in accordance with nuisance code abatement. And I would venture to say I think it is very unlikely that staff would immediately order an abatement on a property that was novel and one that we hadn't had repeated contacts with. In my experience, our code enforcement officer usually tries to make repeated contacts and really exceeds what is in the ordinance, trying to work with people and help them come into compliance versus penalizing them. But for repeat offenders, having that may hire a contractor could be an important tool. But I don't want you to think we're going to immediately hire a contractor at 24 hours and 1 minute on the first notice. That is not the case.
Councilor Shumway.
Well, I was just going to say this. I think it's important for us to be very clear on the two notices. Let me just give you an example. Most children start praying for a white Christmas, and then if the snow's 2 feet Christmas morning, they're thrilled. So let's suppose it snows 2 feet on Christmas morning. On the 26th, Brian comes in and puts a tag on their door at noon. And then 24 hours later, which is the 27th, no removal. So here comes another tag. 24 hours later, no removal, so there's abatement. What they've done is they've taken 96 hours before there's any fine, abatement, or administrative fees. We're giving them 96 hours with two notices, and that's doing it quickly. I think we need to be very clear, that we're trying to get them to remove snow without, heavy penalties with just the very first notice. So I'm in favor of a first notice warning with the menu of the what it would cost if they don't comply. The second notice, there's going to be action taken, but we're giving them so much time that I just don't think it's unreasonable for us to think that a prudent person wouldn't do the right thing. We're just going after the ones that are the serious offenders, because after 96 hours, everyone has plenty of time to notify owners, and neighbors or whatever to help take care of the problem. So we've got to clarify whether it's event or whether it's just two notices or whatever it is, so that we can be very clear and everyone else out there will know exactly what to anticipate.
Councilor Schuster.
It's going on too long. I want to make a quick comment and then I'll be quiet. Absentee landlords, got a bunch of them. My daughter-in-law and son attended college here. It's where they met and everything like that. She stayed in her dad's house he purchased because he had 4 kids going to college. He felt that was the thing to do. So after all of the kids had graduated from the University of Wyoming, he then kept it for 2 years and decided it wasn't worth it. Why? When his kids were in there, they did the right thing. They knew that their dad was going to hold them accountable for cleaning the sidewalk. The people that rented it afterwards, it was in their lease. He lives 180 miles away. If we contact him, he is not going to jump into his vehicle, drive here, and clean the walks. All these absentee landlords have either no intention of doing it, or it's in their lease that the people renting it will do it. And I'll guarantee if we checked about 3/4 of the leases of people that rent houses here in town, an actual house, you're going to find out They're supposed to be mowing the lawn, and they're supposed to be shoveling the sidewalk. And I hate to say I've done both at this house. Because you had people that just didn't care. Even though they signed a contract, said, I will take care of it. So I have no problem with this. We were talking about people from Timbuktu. They put it in the lease or they don't care if they're fined. It's one or the other. They're not going to jump in their vehicle and drive 100 miles to scoop snow.
Councilor Gabriel.
Thank you, Mayor. I was very much concerned about the heavy hand of the city coming down on some of these property owners and having a contractor come out, and that's why I was initially in favor of this 2 separate notices. From what the city manager has said, it makes me feel much better now that the city's not going to go out automatically and start the contractor procedure, and so it's kind of up in the air right now. I just want to see the street, the sidewalks cleared as best as possible, but I don't want to see the city come down, without proper notice. And it sounds like, maybe even 2 separate notices, as we've talked about, is maybe too much at this time. But the language, I think, needs to be clarified, and I'm not sure where all that's going to go.
City Attorney, let me ask you a quick question. So if this amendment passes and you're going to go back and wordsmith and put things together, can you bring back a couple of different options with clarifications? I think that's what Councilor Gabriel is getting at, is if we pass this policy level, then I think they're maybe not quite sure on the meaning, and we want to make sure that whatever we do put in the ordinance, if it postpones.
If I understand that the point of this is to make sure that there's a couple of notices before the hammer falls, even though the hammer won't fall very often, as city manager explained, then I will sit down with staff and come up with a couple, 3 options, and a menu, and you can choose between them.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, is everybody okay? We go to roll call on this item?
Can we just give, ask for administrative decision, work on this before we go, because if we're going to pass something that's specific, and I'd rather have it just options for the next, when we postpone it, to come back for us to consider, because we're in the 3rd reading.
We are, and Councilor Shumway, I think that what staff or city manager and city attorney have told us that this is vague enough. It's more of a general policy decision. They can come back with a couple very specific options.
But not keep it.
Yeah, so if we pass any of these, we need to postpone it 2 weeks so that the city attorney can do and city manager can do all this work and then bring back the specific language.
We need to, but that doesn't mean we will.
Touche. That's right. That's right. I would recommend that if we pass these, we postpone it 2 weeks. Okay, so, Vice Mayor.
So I just want to be clear. If we vote no, we are fine with 1 notice. If we vote yes, that means we are okay with 2 notices and then a proposed menu of choices that all have to do with 2 notices.
Essentially.
Is that right?
That's what I understand,
Yes.
Your Honor.
Okay, so I just want to say I am fine with 1 notice. Plenty.
City Clerk, let's do roll call on this one.
Stoner.
Yes.
Schuster.
No.
Shumway.
No.
Palikas.
Yes.
McKinney.
No.
Hanson.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Pierce.
No.
Somerville.
Yes.
That's 5 yeses and 4 nos.
Yep, amendment carries. All right, so let's do items number 3. Councilor Stoner, you want to put 3 on the floor?
I move that the property owner will be contacted by physical posted notice, telephone, and electronic communication.
Do we have a second for that one?
I will second.
Second by Councilor Gabriel. So the explanation on this one is right now it just says that they will post a notice on the door going back to the person that's out of town in May or something. it makes sense. We have this information available to us by utility billing. It makes sense to either give somebody a call or send them an email other than just posting the notice on their door. Planning Manager.
Mayor and Council, I'm just going to tell you right now that I would not support any type of electronic or telephone. It's not reliable. We consistently deal with this on a day-to-day basis. We do this for notices for zoning, comprehensive plan amendments, everything that we do. It goes to the owner that the county has as tax record at the assessors, and posted notice are the only two surefire ways that we can contact people. People put incorrect phone numbers, email addresses, don't check their email, don't answer their phones. We simply just, we cannot rely on it. That's why we do those two notice methods for everything that we do when we have to get a hold of a property owner.
Can I ask a question for you then? Given the conversation around landlords and absentee landlords, if you post a sticker on the door, that landlord doesn't know. So how do you reach out to the property owner to let them know that there's an issue? City Manager?
Mayor, I was going to note that it's my understanding that many of our property owners in town actually write that into a lease. Any notice you receive will be shared by the tenant with the landlord. I hear your concern about wanting to give people as much notice as possible in every method that we can possibly come up with, but I have to agree with Derek. If you want to write in the ordinance that staff will try to contact them by phone and email, we already do that. But it is not a reliable way to contact them. If they own the property, they have a responsibility to be responsible for it, and that means they need to inform their tenants how to handle notices that might come to the property or be posted on the property. So I'm not opposed to some suggestive language in the ordinance, but a mandate will just simply be unenforceable. We won't be able to meet that requirement.
So if I can ask a further clarification, so if we post a notice on a door that's being rented, they don't tell the landlord, we go through this, they become one of the problem properties. The landlord never finds out. That administrative fine and that contractor bill's going to the landlord. So how, as a city, are we in a position to actually assess that if we never notified the landlord? Or the property owner, actually, we never notified them? City Attorney?
Just like a parking ticket, Your Honor.
Okay.
We ticket cars. We don't know who parked it. We don't know who is responsible, who's going to pay it, but we ticket a car, and that owner of that car is responsible for that parking ticket. To be very blunt, in my world, that's their problem. That's why leases have these provisions in them, and they can. But my office can't try to figure out. We can't sort through, was there proper telephone notice, was there proper email communication? We can't even sort through who owns it. We will eventually. So I guess I come down on the side of the planner and the city manager on this. I would think it prudent to say that, where possible, or some sort of language, suggestive language. But I think it's very difficult. We don't do it with our parking tickets, and I don't think we can do it here.
Can I ask a question?
Councilor Plegas?
Is it feasible to cross-reference the who's responsible for paying the utility bills?
Yeah.
We can, and we do that already.
Okay.
Absolutely. We do that as a matter of just general administration. We don't need direction in ordinance to do that, and we do it all the time if we think there's relevant owner data in those databases. But as Derek said, even our own databases, the owners don't keep them up to date. They may, maybe 10 email addresses ago or 5 phone numbers ago, so they're just not a reliable way to give someone a legal notice.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Shumway.
When a owner leases or rents property to somebody and they ignore the notices and there is a penalty that's attached, if they come to the city and say, here's how my lease is written, they're responsible. Do we then transfer the penalty to them, or do they have to then, the owner then has to go to the person that they're renting from and said, I just paid your fine, you agreed to pay this, so it's coming out of your deposit or whatever. That's the way it works, correct?
City Attorney?
That's correct.
Okay, so we don't transfer it back and forth. They're the ones. The owner is the one that's responsible to take care of all of the costs of snow removal.
Yes, Councilor.
Any other discussion by council on this? Is there any public comment on this amendment? Please come forward.
The notice on the door sounds good, but let's take the time period right now. You've got an apartment with 4 college kids in it. Most college kids take off during the Christmas break. So the fact that there's a notice on the door with all good intentions doesn't mean that anybody's going to see it or notify the property owner or anything else. Now, in respect to the comments that have been made about contacting the person that's responsible, and I believe one of the examples was the parking ticket in your car. I recall the city issuing me a citation, and they had my phone number, they had my address, there was never any issue about it. And then the municipal court was going to establish a court date and send me that court date. And that was several years ago. I've yet to get that court date. And see, it's real convenient when you have somebody at the city, for example, that likes to play some games, because then if you miss your court date, the judge can issue a warrant for your arrest for failure to appear. And so what starts out as a $10 fine can really develop into something where you've got to get yourself out of jail. So I think every effort should be made, and furthermore, in that particular instance, I requested from the court that any communication in the future regarding this matter, that the communication be sent to me, certified mail receipt. They could do that, but I'd have to pay for it. So if you're really sincere about dumping this on the property owner, then you better figure out a way of reliably notifying the property owner so that if the property owner who thought that the college kids were going to take care of it and who historically did, except when there's a vacation, may be left holding the bag and, once again, having to pay a tremendous fine and for this whole abatement process, and they're not going to be happy. I think it's taking advantage of the few people that really want to do the right thing, but there was a system, as a perfect storm in that it occurred when the tenants were not home and the landlord in Timbuktu didn't know it snowed here. So this is something that I think should be looked upon. And in terms of getting a hold of property owners, take for example the property owner between Downey and Renshaw on 9th Street. That sidewalk hasn't been shoveled all winter. But then we all know that there's a relationship with Wyotech.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this amendment? Okay. Any other further discussion by council on this one? Councilor Gabriel?
Well, I think you have to have some kind of record. What happens if you have a tremendous windy day and it gets blown away? As Mr. Hales talked about, you have students that are gone. There's no way to notify the property owner. I mean, there's a lot of circumstances here. I think that the city has to be responsible in making sure that we make contact with the proper people, and noticing on the door, I don't think takes care of it.
Yes, Mayor.
And I get your point, and unfortunately, that's our choice, and so that's just what we have to do. I mean, we live in Laramie. We live in a college town. We know that students go away during the winter break. We know it snows. So the landlord or the property owner needs to take care of that. That's pretty simple. Mm-hmm. The landlord, property, they need to take care of it. It's not that hard. You either hire someone or you get out there and you do it yourself. Right? You hire someone to cut your grass, you hire someone to shovel the snow, or you do it yourself. We know it snows.
Any other comments from council members? Okay. City Clerk, will you do a roll call on this amendment?
Stoner.
Yes.
Schuster.
No.
Shumway.
No.
Palikas.
No.
McKinney.
No.
Hanson.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Pierce.
No.
Somerville.
Yes.
That's 4 yeses and 5 noes, Your Honor.
That motion fails. Counselor Stoner,
Yeah.
put number 4 on.
Sure. I move that the administrative fee for all violations will be $75 plus the contractor charge.
It's
Do we have
25.
we have a second for that amendment? Okay, that one dies for lack of second. All right. Do we have any other, because one of these did pass, sorry, Counselor Schuster.
Since I made the
Apologies.
original motion, I was going to do that for
The
you. If that's
postponement,
okay.
perfect, please go right ahead.
I move that we postpone original ordinance number 1976 until the attorney can wordsmith properly the will of the council on the amendments that were passed.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Counselor McKinney. Any discussion on the postponement? City Attorney.
I've been talking with staff a little bit, Your Honor. It may be 4 weeks instead of 2.
Okay. I don't, that was not a date certain postponement. It just said until the attorney got it done.
Well, we probably better do a date certain.
How about May?
Are we supposed to have a
Do
date
you
certain?
want, Counselor Palikas?
Is that motion on the floor to postpone?
It is, yes.
All right. Not directly to the postponement, but related to the postponement, if you will. I voted the way I voted because I'm willing to consider changes. I'm not necessarily willing to support them if it doesn't achieve something and still protect. What I'm saying is, just because I voted that way, I'm not totally committed that the second notice that needs to be done, but I'm willing to consider listening and seeing what comes about. And I just wanted to make that statement going forward.
City Attorney or City Manager, do you need a date certain on that postponement, or is the vagueness fine?
I would defer to the city clerk.
City Clerk?
I believe we need a date certain on an ordinance.
February 6th will be,
February 6th?
February 6th.
Okay.
we'll give them then
Does
the
the
4
second
weeks.
agree? February 6th? Okay. Any other discussion on the postponement? Are there any public comments on the postponement motion? City Clerk, roll call on the postponement, please.
Schuster.
Yes.
Stoner.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
McKinney.
Yes.
Palikas.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Pierce.
No.
Somerville.
Yes.
That's 8 yeses and 1 no, Your Honor.
Just shovel.
The motion
Just
carries.
shovel.
There you go.
There you go.
That's your headline. Just shovel.
Just got it, Ike.
Yep.
All right, let's go on to item number 11A. Counselor Schuster.
Okay, I think I misstated my postponement. I think I wrote in the ordinance number for this one, so I apologize. I know they will catch it and fix that for me. The title is Original Ordinance Number 1976, amending the section of ours to turn from a free day at the landfill to issuing a coupon, 1 per residence. And I move to approve third and final reading of ordinance number 1976, amending section 13.62.090 of the Laramie Municipal Code, which establishes a community cleanup day fee waiver at the Laramie landfill, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gabriel. You guys gave me a scare there for a second.
A lot of seconds tonight. Yeah, me too.
It almost died there, Director Smith.
Yeah,
Floor is yours.
startled me. Your Honor, the Mayor and members of council, this is third reading of an ordinance that would revise Section 13.62.090 of the Municipal Code regarding community cleanup days. It's a relatively simple change. It changes it from a one-day cleanup day to a voucher program that would be extended over a 30-day period. So that's the essence of the ordinance. It adds efficiencies to the program. It's more convenient to the community, and we have some recent success with Albany County running a program very similar to this. So we didn't intend to get too far down in the weeds on this issue, but unfortunately that got away from me. So we did include a draft policy that we discussed at the last meeting, and as Manager Jordan mentioned earlier, we do have some concerns and issues with that, and I think Janine wants to mention that to you.
See, man.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Public Works Department on second reading had offered a draft administrative policy as well as a program outline at the request of council, wherein on first and second readings you would pose some questions about how we would administer the program if you adopt this policy of having vouchers. I noted this afternoon that it appears when I wasn't here 2 weeks ago that on second reading there was a lot of conversation about whether the vouchers should be made available to the public in City Hall, in addition to the original location that Director Smith had mentioned, which was at our solid waste offices. When I noticed that today, I want to point out to Council that I can't guarantee you that we can do that. I need more time to vet that out. If you'll recall, we've eliminated 4 positions in City Hall this year, and we've closed our customer service walk-up windows, reducing them by about 40%. So if we were going to take on the responsibility of moving those vouchers out of this building, I'm going to need some more time to assess what we need to do. Do we need to hire somebody so we can get the counters back up and that kind of thing? The other thing that we would need to assess is, frankly, how we track that data in real time across 2 different areas of the city. The proposal that Public Works had put forward kept the administration of the voucher program completely within their department. If we have multiple locations, we are going to need to find a way to share that information, like I said, real time, so that we don't have someone come here and get a voucher and then drive, literally 30 seconds down 4th Street and get a second voucher with nobody realizing that, because our Excel spreadsheets simply aren't updating their individual user sheets and not a network activity of the city where lots of people can log in and view them at a single time. So I want to point out to you how we administer your policy objective is really within our purview, but I got very concerned because I saw this information in your packet, and I don't want you to adopt a policy based on some assumptions about how we will administer it that are not possible. Or if they are possible, I need more time to vet out how to make that a reality.
Councilor Schuster.
I don't know if you need a amendment or what you would like, but I'd like to say that the vouchers will be in one spot, and we don't need to increase the cost of this. Cost is an extreme thing we have right now, so I would just like to ask how you'd like that done. But it was already kind of out there. We only discussed maybe we'd do it a different way. We never put it in pen that we would do a different way. So I'd like to state, is there some way we can state one place only?
So I think, Councilor Schuster, to your question, this is part of the administrative policy that's solely under the responsibility of the city manager. It is not part of the ordinance. So I don't think an amendment would be appropriate to put that in there unless you wanted to make that a policy piece of the ordinance. Otherwise, I think we can express opinions, and if there seems to be a significant difference, maybe we'll postpone it as the city manager has asked, but if not, then I think we can pass it as is. Councilor Shumway, and then Hanson, and then Gabriel.
I think to make this simple, we could just online indicate where the vouchers can be picked up at the Public Works, and also at City Hall. If people come here, just have a voucher information piece of paper that you hand to them. Here's the address. Here's the hours. Here's where you go to pick it up. So if you put that both online and at City Hall, the people that felt like or thought that there was going to be multiple options, they'll be, very quickly say, just right down there is where you go pick up your voucher, and that'll take care of it. I think you can hand out a piece of paper in a couple seconds. So
You just lay them on the counter. Councillor Hanson?
No.
Okay. Councillor Gabriel?
Thank you, Mayor. The last thing I want to do as a counselor is micromanage the city. I know that you guys can handle this. We've talked about it during our work session, that you guys can handle the administrative part of this probably better than we can come up with some kind of plan. You know the situation, and I don't think it was ever our purview to tell you, okay, this is the way it's going to be administered. So I have complete confidence that you guys can handle this.
Yeah.
City Manager?
Mayor and Council, if I can just add one thing. You'll also note in the materials that Earl had mentioned our desire to provide these vouchers through some online platform. And I'll tell you, I'm very committed to that. And Earl and I discussed it last week. The new software we've implemented in my office for permitting, I think we can adapt and perhaps use for this purpose, maybe not in this voucher season cycle, but next. So to me, that's a great way for us to provide better customer service to the community if they can get online if they so choose. It allows us to have fewer people standing, at windows waiting for people to walk up, and frankly, fewer people walk up when they have that option. So we're committed to going that route in lieu of multiple locations physically in the city.
City Manager, I'll add, when I read through this draft policy, I think it says that they would be available at City Hall and the other places, but it also said that it would begin April 1st, and it would only be for the hours of 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Thursday is what's written in the policy. So I took that as not being any kind of alteration to the counter hours that we had already, but I certainly don't have, I understand for me, I'm okay, whatever you guys need to do. I think that convenience is really important, and it makes the program function a lot better, and maybe after we have our Northern Public Works Center building, that'll be more of an icon that people understand where they're going instead of hopping along 4th Street, but all in good time. So, Councillor Hanson.
Hey, actually, just a question for the city manager. The way you envisioned this, out at the landfill, I could come out with my little pickup truck with the load and say, I haven't picked up a voucher yet. Could I get my voucher? Drive through, so you don't have to go out twice to the landfill?
I'll let Earl answer it, but Councilmember Hanson, the voucher pickup would be on 4th Street at the solid waste offices, not at the landfill. Earl, do you want to add anything?
But you could do it the same day, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no problem. There's just a question, how you would administer. You would pick them up at 4th Street, not at the landfill anymore.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions for Director Smith or City Manager? Okay, thank you. And that includes on the ordinance in total, not just the administrative discussion. Any comments from the public on this? Please come forward.
I briefly heard at the last council meeting a discussion about the dump trucks, and that seemed to be a bone of contention about dump trucks showing up. I think it's an assumption made that a dump truck is evil. I think you're missing the point in that if one assumes that the landfill is the appropriate place for garbage and the like, then how it gets out there or the quantity that gets out there is really immaterial because that's what it's designed for. And I think every effort should be made to encourage the public to utilize the dump in an appropriate manner, as opposed to somebody saying, I've got a dump truck full of shingles and it's pretty costly to take it out to the dump and I didn't get a voucher or whatever the excuses are, so they go up to Vitavoo and make a dump. And I think it's instances like that is why we should encourage the proper use of the dump to everyone in the community, regardless of essentially the quantity that they have, because these could very well possibly be the same people that aren't doing the right thing in regards to sidewalks, that who knows, they can take this garbage up to Rogers Canyon, and I think we've seen plenty of instances where there's refrigerators and bed springs and mattresses and everything else up there in Rogers Canyon. So to alleviate that, the encouragement should be made to use the dump. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment on the third reading of this ordinance? Any further council discussion? City Clerk, roll call, please.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
McKinney.
Yes.
Felikas.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Stoner.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment on non-agenda items. Do we have anybody that wishes to make public comment on non-agenda items this evening?
This is about the third time I've approached the council in regards to the trespassing complaint that I tried to get processed through the police department. And of course, I was told that it was a civil matter. What I would like the city council is to direct the city attorney to communicate with me as to why this was a civil matter and what conditions I need to do in the future to alleviate, presumably, a civil matter so that it does qualify as a criminal matter, that being trespassing. And it's never really been defined to me. And I think that entirely too much emphasis has been placed on a police chief that stresses his policies. And policy doesn't trump state statute. And if our city attorney feels that it does, then I need to know about that. And in lieu of wasting the police department's time and my time, I think it ought to be spelled out. And furthermore, for other issues that the public may have, because it's obvious that I've got some questions and there's some gray area, I think it would be appropriate if the police department published their general orders and all their policies so that the public can see what the guidelines are so they know when to call and when it's appropriate and so forth. And I think this policy is nothing more than a catch-all for excuses for the police department. I recall one occasion where I was trying to do the right thing, and I noticed an oil dumping that emanated from the Viaduct dormitories straight into the storm sewer. And I called the police department, and they had a fire truck come out, and they're cleaning this mess up. And I happened to be walking by, and the officer asked me if I was the one that called it in. And I said, yes, I did. And he wanted my name. I gave him my name. Then he wanted my date of birth. And I said, well, that's a real good question. Why don't you ask the perpetrator what his date of birth is? And so there seems to be this obsession with date of birth, and then they can justify it. I don't know, in this particular case, was if the police department needed my date of birth so that they could ascertain that I owned the oil or I owned the storm sewer or what their excuse was. But it seems to be directed to get as much personal information from people who are trying to do the right thing. And, when it comes to policy, what was the policy on one of the cops shooting the windshield out of another cop's car next door? What was the policy of the cops renting a convertible down in Phoenix, Arizona when they weren't supposed to and getting out of the seminar and so forth? What was the policy on our police chief using city credit card for purchase of a spa? I mean, I'm not so certain that they're a bunch of angels. And they seem to be able to get away with all these things and justifying it and calling it policy. And then when a citizen has a legitimate complaint about a trespassing, they're told it's a civil matter. And if that's the case, and this city council is going to buy it, then I think you should really look hard the next time their budget comes up and start drawing some lines through their budget. Because our police department has made a mockery of this. And I think part of the problem that they see this is that the officers on the street, and I'm generalizing, they know virtually whatever they do, the police chief will back them. The police chief knows that the city manager will back them. And the city manager knows that the council is going to back her. So there's never any accountability. And if I have given false information and false reporting to the police department, then the other option is this council should direct the city attorney to prosecute me, because I welcome it.
Are there any other comments on non-agenda items this evening? Okay, seeing none, move on to item number 13, consideration of future council work session topics. I have one suggestion for everybody, and I should have brought it up a month ago. I went to an entrepreneurship seminar, and we have some very interesting entrepreneurship things developing out of UW, and they would like to come talk to the council and give us an update. Everybody okay with scheduling that in the future? Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other suggestions on work sessions? And any questions on upcoming meetings? All right. Councilor Hanson, item 14.
I move that council adjourn.
Second.
Second by the Vice Mayor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.